Welcome to Mindful Me. I'm your host, Dr. Marga Zarraga, family medicine physician and life coach practicing medical aesthetics and wellness based in Greater Boston in Wellesley and Needham. This health and wellness show was born out of the needs I saw as a medical doctor. People are curious and are even demanding information and options on how to get healthier, and more importantly, how do we all improve our quality of life? And quality of life is simply, how do I feel good from moment to moment, minute to minute, hour to hour, and day to day? It's my goal to highlight to you, our viewers at home, the knowledge and experience of various experts from both mainstream and complementary disciplines to inspire action in our communities in the areas of self-care and self-development, physically, mentally, and energetically. Today's guest is Sara Schley. She is an author, speaker, and consultant. Sara Schley is an expert by experience according to the International Society for Bipolar Disorders. Sara is an international business consultant and a speaker who has led organizational transformations at groundbreaking companies around the world. There are 11 million Americans with some form of bipolar and millions more whose lives they touch. These people are hungry for hope, inspiration, education, and strategies for living well with bipolar that Brainstorm provides, the book that Sara authored. Our pandemic-induced mental health tsunami is stretching healthcare providers, like myself, everywhere beyond the breaking point. By illuminating the little-known bipolar spectrum, our episode offers these professionals listening to our episode new understanding and practical strategies for addressing the crises. Sara Schley is author for Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum, Self-Care Brilliance. And with that, I welcome you, Sara, to Mindful Me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marga. It's such a privilege to be here.
People need to understand that you drove hours here.
Not too far.
No, still. I mean, this is a special show indeed, but I do appreciate all the efforts of our experts and guests to make their knowledge available. I also want you to know that people outside of the US watch this show. And as you may or may not know, there are many areas of the world that are behind in terms of awareness in mental health. And certainly the bipolar spectrum, which we will educate our audience about today, is probably not a term that some people watching this episode have heard. In your words, what is the simplest way to explain the bipolar spectrum?
Thank you so much for the question. Really, I mean, most people, even most health practitioners that I found, don't know that this exists. And when I've been out speaking and talking and I ask how many of you have heard of a bipolar spectrum, very few, if any, hands go up. So, typically I would ask the question back to you, and I know you have a lot of information about psychology and stuff as we spoke before the show, but even most practitioners, if I say, when you think of bipolar, what do you think? And most people will say something like this, wild highs, extreme highs and lows, erratic behavior, irresponsible behavior. And the truth is that they're only describing just one end, the extreme end of the bipolar spectrum. That's typically what's known as bipolar 1 or manic depression, right? But again, that's only the one extreme. Mm. And then at the very other extreme is classic manic depression, just straight depression, you might say. But all the way in between are all variations of the bipolar spectrum. And why it's so insidious and hard to recognize is that this is bipolar without mania. Okay? When I show up in a doctor's office or millions of people like me, and I may be, dragging myself there on my own or dragged by somebody, I look like somebody with standard depression. I have a lot of the same symptoms like, lethargy, maybe suicidal ideation, no joy, no desire for life. And when a standard practitioner sees that, they think, oh, she's depressed. But there's a bunch of other steps to find out that I actually have a form of bipolar.
One thing I can tell you is, as a primary care doctor, my background is family medicine. And I've been fortunate that I've had more training in mental health than I would say the usual. I would say an above average experience when I trained in New York, because my faculty member was double boarded in psychiatry and family medicine. So if he's watching right now, Dr. Paul Rosen, I don't think he'd mind saying his name, Dr. Paul Rosen. So I owe a lot of that holistic understanding. But I have to say that I do see that experience and also my openness to mental health and the needs of those who are going through that is not usual. And so that's why I feel your identification of this issue and your efforts are very significant, because, you know, healthcare professionals are in front of this, but as you said, we don't have the lenses for it.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
yes, and I want to say, I think I want to understand, and I want the audience to understand, what is driving and motivating you to do this?
Me, wow. Well, it took me over 25 years, 7 medications, and 5 psychiatrists to finally get the diagnosis that saved my life. Wow. To learn that I actually have bipolar, it's actually Roman numeral 2, bipolar 2 on the bipolar spectrum. And in the interim 25 years, lots of suffering, severe suffering. And I, you know, in the book it goes in a lot of detail what's that like, and we can talk more about it. But I'm also at least 3rd generation. My mother, and we spoke before the show, my mother actually lived in Needham at the end of her life, where we are.
Yes.
And she was given her diagnosis here at the Beth Israel. My mom suffered for decades, not knowing the proper diagnosis, and her father before her, my grandfather. So we know that this is generational, so I feel it for them. But if you're like me and you've suffered with any kind of this sort of broken brain, I call it, you would do anything you could to keep the next person from suffering like that.
Wow.
So that's why I'm out there.
Wow. I call that love. You can call it
I
anything
call it
you
love
want.
too.
Yeah, I feel like you made that sound easy, but all I heard was 25 years and suffering.
Yeah.
Because somebody out there is suffering and needs to hear this message. So how have you been received with this book?
Well, so
Brainstorm,
yeah,
From
Brainstorm.
Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum, Sara Schley.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this book and, you know, the journey you've had.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first I want to say 25 years to get the diagnosis, but 40 years, and I know I don't look that old, but 40 years
Agree.
from my first incident to when I felt safe enough to come out in
yes,
quotes,
my gosh.
right? Because of tremendous stigma, tremendous shame, fear, right? And it took me, you know, getting to the grand old age that I am, and also, as you spoke, the pandemic-induced mental health tsunami, to finally be willing to say, look, I got to tell my story here, because if I can help anyone else, then it's worth it. And we know that families are suffering and people are suffering, and the suicide rates are spiking, particularly among our youth. So we got to do something. So it's interesting to learn that more people like myself are starting to speak their truth. Just this week, there was a brilliant op-ed by the acting Surgeon General in California, and she wrote, I'm the acting Surgeon General of California, and I'm bipolar. And she said she was terrified. She and I have now become colleagues and somewhat friends.
That's so good.
Your heart pounds. You know, like, is this okay? Am I going to be safe? I'm going to lose my friends. I'm going to lose my colleagues. Am I going to get fired from my job? It turns out, you asked, how was I received? It's been the opposite. It's been a flood of love.
Oh, I love
It's been so much, hey, you go girl, thank you for your vulnerability, thank you for your courage. And then so many people, me too, my cousin, my mother, my nephew, my aunt, my sister has what you have. And all of a sudden you're not alone.
More on this when we get back to break. Thank you, Sara. See you after break.
Hi, I'm Zach.
Hi, I'm Ben Gilman.
Hello, my name is Susan Reisner.
Hi, I'm Heidi Frail, member of the Select Board.
Hi, I'm Coach Dave Powell from Needham Boys Volleyball.
Hi, I'm Shara. Hi, I'm Ava. I'm 11. You're watching the Needham Channel. And you're watching the Needham Channel. And you're watching the Needham Channel.
And you're watching the Needham Channel. And you're watching the Needham Channel.
And you are watching the Needham Channel.
And you are watching the Needham Channel.
Imagine always being front row to plays like this.
Opts for the layup, and he throws it down.
Or this.
It's a ball headed out. Low shot. Yes! Oh, Miranda!
And even this.
Manning.
Ouch.
Oh my God.
Being able to capture high school sports at their highest level.
Chmielewski under it, and the Rockets are state champions!
Your Division I 2021 state champions.
Here at the Needham Channel, you can do all of those things and more. Plus, we definitely have our fun here too. Interested? We'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at sports@needhamchannel.org or visit our website, needhamchannel.org, for more information.
Welcome back to Mindful Me. For our quote of the day, talk to yourself as if you were talking to someone you love. Back to you, Sarah. I was reflecting on what you just said before the break. You mentioned coming from fear, shame, and guilt, and now received with this enormous amount of love and acceptance. Like, if you look at the heaviness of where you started and the upliftment that you're at right now, take us through that journey as you went through one end to the other.
Yeah.
And you made this book. Go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, well, just going back even just a year, when I decided to come forward with the book and, tell people about it. And obviously you got to get on social media. And I remember the first time a neighbor wrote me that she had seen my post. Even though I'd done the post, my heart was pounding. There's some, tremendous fear about telling the truth about mental health situations, even though there shouldn't be. And this is part of my whole talk. It's like, if you had diabetes, you would take insulin, right? If you had a lung issue, you might have an inhaler. If you had heart disease, you might take blood thinners. So pancreas, heart, lungs, why do we treat challenges of the brain differently? It's a physical thing. Nonetheless, we're all filled with shame because there's this vast social stigma. You think about people with bipolar and you imagine somebody in the street or worse, right? So that's internalized shame. But it turns out that when I finally was willing to come forward, in a kind of claiming health, and in the very end, you'll see I have a chapter in there on bipolar pride. Then again, the reception I've had has been without exception, love and blessing, and you go girl. And like I said before, people then being willing to tell their stories of vulnerability. And I feel like 20 pounds lighter.
Wow.
I feel, free. I feel it's crazy. Like I just have so much more energy. All the energy that we spend repressing our guilt or our shame, all of a sudden, freedom. And it's really lovely. I had no idea that I would feel as happy as I am having this conversation about a difficult subject.
And yes, there's totally, I don't feel any heaviness at all. And but I do want to say that what you talked about, how much energy we put into the shame, guilt, and fear, I end up, I would say, leading some of the people in my circles to identify what I call draining energy. If you unconsciously or consciously put focus on emotions that are just taking away from you, then you have to realize that the outcome of that is you have less energy for all the other beautiful things in your life. And so, but it's a process.
Yeah.
And just like that's why I feel like, holding this book, like I'm holding in my hand, not just pages, but process.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely,
I'm just taking that all in. And I want to ask you, in this book, what are some of I would say the strong messages or the high impact messages that you feel people are responding to?
Thank you. Strong, high impact messages. One, there's a bipolar spectrum. You know, if you have depressive symptoms and you've been even diagnosed with depression, if you're taking antidepressants and they're not working, you may actually be on the bipolar spectrum. From the doctors that I've been working with, you mentioned I'm a ISBD expert by experience, so I've gotten to know these famous world-class bipolar doctors on the mood spectrum, Dr. Jim Phelps, Dr. Holly Schwartz, others. And they've taught me that 1 in 3 people that show up in their doctor's office who are actually diagnosed with depression, 1 in 3 may be on the bipolar spectrum. Those folks are given the wrong medications.
That's a lot.
That's a
1 in 3.
lot. And because how many scripts are there for antidepressants?
Yes.
Millions, tens of millions. And most of those scripts are written by everybody, psychiatrists? No. 80% of antidepressants are actually prescribed by primary care physicians, most of whom have not had the fabulous training that you've had, Dr. Marga.
Not only that, I mean, we have a stronger primary care base because we've involved advanced practitioners, which could be physician assistants. We have nurse practitioners now, right? So the base is broader than just primary care, but it comes from primary care.
Right,
Yes.
and these folks, look, I have a niece, brilliant niece. She's in her 2nd year of residency for primary care. I said, Molly, how much training did you have in your residency in psychiatry? 1 month. This was at a top university. Now, these are the same people that are going to go out and write 80% of the scripts for antidepressants. Kind of do the math. 1 in 3 of those people may be on the bipolar spectrum. That's a lot of scripts, a lot of people walking around with the wrong medication. And those medications, the same medications that can do beautifully for someone with major depression on this end of the spectrum, can actually act like poison for somebody with a bipolar brain like me.
Wow.
And I can't say not for everybody, but for a lot of people. In my case, antidepressants were bad news. So one of the huge messages, there is a bipolar spectrum. If you're experiencing symptoms, double check. Like my bipolar docs, they always say screen for bipolarity, screen for bipolarity, screen for bipolarity in a primary care situation, because you may find out that this person is actually, do you want to know how long it took the guy who finally got it right for me?
You mentioned it, but go ahead and say it again.
Okay, so I said 25 years. The 5th psychiatrist. The first 4 practically killed me. I love psychiatrists. I know you're doing the best you can. But because they gave me the wrong meds. The 5th guy, it took him 15 minutes after 25 years. How did he know? You mentioned before, a lens. He had a lens around the bipolar spectrum. So he knew he had a diagnostic test that anybody can use. It's in the public domain. You can find it on my website or anywhere else. 15 questions. Question 3, he was done.
I'm happy to tell you that because I've come across a lot of people who come to me to discuss these things. There are screeners that are now in primary care tools that specifically, it used to just be depression and anxiety. I'm happy to tell you that bipolar is in there. However, it will still take the lens. It will still take a very committed clinician.
Correct.
And when I say committed, like if you have 5, 10, 15, you have to get it in there somewhere if it's a regular setting of a clinic. Or when I say commitment, it can also be a patient like yourself committed to finding a solution and not just accepting that living in a low energy existence is acceptable. So, you know, I encourage people out there who are listening to us, regardless of whether it's bipolar or not, to question, first of all, to question whether there is a solution out there. To have hope that there is a solution out there, I think is the better term.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, like the quote that I said, be kind to yourself. Because being kind to yourself will take you to that next step and that next person. You don't have to do it alone. And that's why we're doing this show, is we want the people at home to feel the energy in this studio right now, that they are not alone.
Yeah.
And that there are people who care out there. Please do consider getting the book, Brainstorm, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum, Sara Schley. We're going to have you again. Yes, we're going to have you again, Sara.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Mindful Me. Please look for us on Facebook and YouTube. Join us again. Thank you.